Oh, Lucy, don't you realize what you've done? Our hopes, our plans, our love.
I realize.
Hi there, and welcome back to my investigation of the silent but talky career of Richard Barthelmess. Part 5. In 1928, Richard, along with two other silent but talky stars, Betty Compson and Loretta Young, appeared in Scarlet Seas, a silent film with a Vitaphone soundtrack for music and sound effects. However, in 1929, Richard was ready to be heard on the screen for his first time and make his full talkie debut, in the part-talkie Weary River, which I actually just watched last weekend. Teamed with Betty Compson again, Richard played Jerry Larrabee, a relatively good gangster who was framed for a murder by a rival and sent to jail. Through the guidance of a kind warden, played by William Holden, not the William Holden of later 1940s and 50s star fame, Jerry eventually cools off and finds himself through his love of music. I forgot to mention that earlier in the film he sang and played piano for fun. Jerry writes a song called Weary River that becomes a smash hit on the radio and gets him lots of opportunities upon his parole. But will he succeed, or will his past catch up with him to throw him back into a life of crime? I have to say this film was excellent. I cannot recommend it enough. You can get it on DVD from Amazon for relatively cheap. What I actually loved about it was the fact that it was a part-talkie, so some scenes were silent and some were talking, but I never knew which ones were going to be which, making it kind of an exciting, unexpected watch. Also, for 1929, the cinematography and sound design were fantastic, especially in comparison to many other talkies from that same year. Richard and Betty gave their usual terrific performances, but sometimes were upstaged by the incredible William Holden as the warden. The film appears to have done mostly well both commercially and critically. Frank Lloyd received an Oscar nomination for Best Director, but ultimately lost to himself for Best Director for directing Corinne Griffith and The Divine Lady. The New York Times review was not particularly great, though. Essentially, the critic felt that the material was beneath the talents of both Richard and Betty. However, Variety raved about the film. They said, "The film is a credit to Richard, Betty, Frank Lloyd, and every person involved." They went on to write, "Barthelmess emerges as possibly the first of the veteran film stars to register a clean-cut wow in the articulate cinema. His voice has human warmth, and he uses it with an unexpected range of effect. Always he is natural, sincere, conveying by deft suggestion the shades of meaning that speak to his sympathies." Both journals praised Richard's singing, but aside from a few notes that you'll hear in a moment, most of his singing was dubbed. Take a look at these two scenes in which we first hear Richard speak and sing.
Hello, baby.
Hello, Jerry. Everything all right?
Why, sure, everything's all right. Did you ever see me when it wasn't?
Oh, I know. But when you get a telephone call like you did tonight, when you walk out with that look in your eyes, I get a cold chill all over. You know, it's two sure guys like you that find themselves looking at the bottom of things.
How about a nice, tall glass, a lot of ice, and a little coloring?
Oh, how you love that right, Jerry. Sing it. Don't be just for me.
All right, baby. Right here, Johnny works sweetheart. Oh, my, how they did love.
Weary River was the first in what historian Mick LaSalle calls Richard's films of conscience and seriousness of purpose. LaSalle points out that Richard was given his choice of films at First National, which was now a part of Warner Brothers, and had a say in what type of finished product his films were. Thus, many of them bravely addressed social issues of the day when few other stars were brave enough to do so. Weary River was the first, but not the last. LaSalle writes, The movie invites us to imagine what an ex-con without Barthelmess's looks or reins might have been up against. This was an advanced statement for 1929, made yet more sophisticated by the climax. Jerry is saved from committing a violent crime through the intervention of his mall. The gangster is the hero and the bad girl is the good girl. In 1930, Richard continued his tradition of the social issue film with The Dawn Patrol, which, according to his obituary, was considered by many to be his finest talking picture. In it, Richard played Courtney, a pilot in a squadron in World War I with his friend Douglas Scott, played by Douglas Fairbanks Jr. Most of the film concerns Courtney speaking out against his commanding officers that send young and experienced recruits into air battle before they are readily trained, resulting in preventable casualties. According to Mick LaSalle, Barthelmess's gentleness toward younger officers, his lack of self-indulgence, his everyman looks, and his refusal to hate the enemy mark him as the perfect war hero for a pacifist era. In the film, heroism has less to do with patriotism than with the maintaining of one's dignity and avoiding the reflexive selfishness that fear naturally inspires. Barthelmess was born to play a concerned flight commander who, for the sake of his men, must keep a tight clamp on his emotions. Take a look at the following clip. As you saw, there is a calmness and coolness to Richard's air battle piloting that eventually allows his character to let his guard down and celebrate for getting one of the chief enemy flyers that killed one of his friends. The film had a pacifist message that, again, was primarily allowed to be presented due to Richard's efforts and clout at Warner Brothers. The film was a major box office smash, the third biggest moneymaker for Warner Brothers in 1930. It also got raves critically. The New York Times wrote, "Both Barthelmess and Fairbanks do well, and neither has an easy part." Variety wrote, "Richard Barthelmess contributes another of his dependable performances." Richard made 3 more films at Warner's in 1931 and 1932, before releasing one of his famous pre-co talkies in 1932, alias The Doctor. This film saw Richard as Carl Brenner, who was in medical school with his foster brother Stephen, played by Norman Foster. Stephen botches an operation which results in the death of his girlfriend. The operation was at his apartment after he accidentally injured her. FYI, parts of this plot are a little far-fetched. Carl arrives and tries to help and ultimately takes the blame for the death of the girl and goes to jail. When he is released, Stephen has passed away and Carl rises to the occasion when a sick child needs surgery despite having not actually finished medical school. A doctor, thinking he is Stephen, sees his work and gives him a job. There's also a romantic subplot with Lottie, played by Marion Marsh, who Carl loves, but since she thinks he is Stephen and Stephen was Lottie's biological brother, their love can never be. While the plot is rather like a confusing soap opera, the acting per usual was outstanding, especially, again, from Richard. The film was also made as Richard's comment on the issues within healthcare in America and how poor folks, like the child he saved, cannot afford the care they need. Watch Richard in the following clip.
Well, who'll take the responsibility? You? You? Haven't helped the man who failed. Well, come on. You don't...
As you saw, his film is also commenting on medical professionals and society in general needing to take responsibility for those who need medical attention the most. Alias the Doctor was one of several pre-co dramas that tackled the issues in the medical community. Others included Night Nurse with Barbara Stanwyck, Registered Nurse with B.B. Daniels, and Dr. Monica with Kay Francis. It was another commercial and critical hit for Richard, but got mixed reviews as a film overall. While Variety called it strictly a Barthelmess picture, they did call his dramatic moments impressive. I'm going to stop there. Stay tuned for Richard Barthelmess, Part 6.